Okay, we've just had a little flurry of extra people join us, but it is just 1 minute past 8, so we're going to make a start, and normally we do have a few people that are sort of in the middle of logging in, and at least one of us tonight has had a very slow computer, so we expect some more people. So welcome to the second We Communities webinar, Tweet. Welcome to our We webinar supported by Diverse Learners, Plymouth University, and We Nursing, We Communities. We've got a bit of an expert panel for us to discuss the topics and themes that we're going to do today. You see our names and our pictures there. So I'm Adele Kane. I'm lecturer down at Plymouth University. I'm based in Cornwall, and I'm the lead for mentorship for health studies, and also work with placement learning. Next we have Andy Cunningham, and he works for Plymouth University Placement Learning, and has recently worked at Exeter University with in the disability service. Many of you will know the famous Teresa Chin from We Nurses and We Communities, Teresa Chin, OBE, and if you've connected with Twitter, then you can't have missed her tweets. Next we have Megan Betts. She's one of our second-year students based in Cornwall, and at the bottom of the screen, on my screen, is Kerry Pace from Diverse Learners. And we also know that there's some people who've joined us from some of the other universities. I know that there's a couple of service users, some of our Plymouth service users, who are also interested and may well join in as well. So we're hoping we've got a diversity of people for us to talk about neurodiversity. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over. And sorry, I forgot to say. And in the back room is is Ray, Professor Ray Jones, our IT extraordinaire, and he's going to be keeping us in order and helping us along should we have any problems, and generally keep us going. So, Kerry, can I ask you to talk a little bit about neurodiversity and what it's all about?
Yeah, absolutely, Adele. Neurodiversity is an umbrella term. It's quite a newly developing term that covers these four main areas. So dyslexia over here in this bubble, ADHD and ADD down in this bubble, which I'm waving my cursor over, autistic spectrum disorder over here, and dyspraxia. Now we have DCD there because developmental coordination disorder is the same as dyspraxia, but that's what it's called in America, and that's beginning to be the name that we're using in the UK as well. So as you can see that these cross over, so there are some shared issues no matter whether you have ADHD, dyslexia, autistic spectrum disorder or dyspraxia, and that's the kind of idea that we're talking about with neurodiversity. So it mentions some difficulties that if you have any of these issues that you would have, so difficulty with organization, memory, concentration, time awareness, where does the time go, I don't know how long things take me, direction, left and right and getting lost, perception, sequencing, poor listening skills. Although I don't like this phrase of that, I like to think, it's processing, taking time to process. And this can really lead to low self-esteem, so we're going to be talking a lot about boosting confidence and reassuring people here. But also you can be very original, very determined, very creative. People often say they think out the box and they see things differently. But what I really want to get over is that everybody is different. So you can't assume that somebody with dyslexia will have difficulty with spelling. That isn't always the case. And that's what we want to talk about today, is about harnessing a really good inclusive approach that is good for all learners, not just those with neurodiversity. Now people who don't have dyslexia or dyspraxia are sometimes referred to as neurotypical, so brain typical, and neurodiversity, brain difference. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I hope so.
That was Potties in a Pot Show. You might, everybody who's watching, you might have noticed one of my colleagues disappearing. What they're going to do is they're going to pop up when I ask them to contribute, or if they have something they want to add, and that's just to be able to signal to me. So I'm going to ask Ray to ask you some questions now. We've got a poll we're going to launch. All you need to do is see the questions, click on the box, and we want to know about you. How are you today? So please go ahead and click the button, unless you're trying to click more than one, of course. Click the button that you feel most fits you, and we'll see how we're going. How's it going, Ray? How are we doing?
90% voted, so
oh, good start.
So I think we'll stop there and show you what's happening. Close and share.
Okay. So most of us are tired and so-so, but there you go. It is the end of the day. So we hopefully, oh, that 29% are great. That's not bad going. Okay. So the next thing we want to know is a little bit about you. And Ray, would you do the next one, please? Yeah. And,
I'd like to thank everybody, if they're feeling tired and so-so, for giving up their time to come and watch the webinar and do the tweet chat. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yes.
We weren't too sure where north and south began and ended, so
it's a tricky one. Somebody's going to tweet, "Hey, you've not included us," and we didn't include Ireland at all. So, and Northern Ireland is. I'm not going to go into that contention whether it's part of the UK or not, but just let us know. It just gives us an idea, or gives us all an idea of kind of our range. Well, most of us south of Birmingham. Goodness. Ooh.
I'm not. I'm in Yorkshire.
Okay. Nobody's joined us from outside of the UK yet, but you never know. So that's fine. So 65% south and 23% north, and then a few scatterings between Wales and Scotland. Welcome to you all from the diversity of the UK. So now, just the last one, we want to find out what sort of job or what sort of role you're in. Ray, if you do the next one, that would be wonderful.
You've got another quick. Can we do the are you on Twitter first?
Yes, please do. Are you using Twitter? Yes. Well, no. If you're not, that's okay, but we'd like to see how many of you are tweeting as well as watching.
Okay. That's half and half.
50-50, not bad going, not bad going at all. Okay, and then lastly, if we could ask you what job you do. Ray, could you do that?
We haven't got that one actually ready.
Oh,
no,
it's gone. Oh, I apologise you. Okay, yeah. Right.
Our next one is about experiences.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to talk about our experiences. And so, have you had any direct or indirect experience? Ray, if you do the last one, then that's great. Thanks. Thanks, Kerry.
That's it.
Lovely.
Most of you have had some experience, so we're going to love you to share that experience with us. And thank you, the 31% of you who are those students. We're definitely going to love to hear what you've got to say. And a few of you haven't, but you're interested, and that's important. An indirect experience means that you have something has actually made you think about it, and even if you haven't actually had direct experience. So thank you very much. That's really quite interesting. So what we want to now look at is sharing some experiences with people. And I don't know if anybody started sharing experiences on Twitter yet, Teresa.
Yes. Hang on. There we are. Yay! So there's quite a few people with who are sharing a few things on Twitter. Kathy has mentioned that it's her first placement is due soon, and she's so nervous that it's affecting her epilepsy. She's written, APD is causing me difficulties, and I'm worried no one will understand. Rachel has also
Can I just
said,
interrupt there?
yeah,
Are you meaning APD is maybe one of the abbreviations, because we all know these abbreviations can mean different things, could be auditory processing disorder, which is one
yeah,
of these things that follows in the neurodiversity, where the message coming into the ear isn't processed and interacted with in perhaps the way that you would expect.
lovely, thank you. So Rachel has also said she met a student nurse with dyslexia today, and she said that she explained her need to print on yellow paper for reading, and that some people were a bit strange about it.
Yeah.
I'm, that's obviously something that happens quite often. So, and somebody
Well,
else.
let me. Sorry, I just interrupted. So I'm just going to show you that you can get little yellow readers. So this will make the white paper. So if we get the white paper and we put it across, and it comes yellow, and actually that's quite useful because that acts as a line to read with. Or if you want just the single line. This is my dyspraxia playing up because I'm trying to get left-right orientation in a camera, and that would be the single line. You can see I can't even get straight. The single line that way, and you can get a number of colours. You can get blue, light blue, here's some I made earlier, green, and these are quite discreet. So if you're having trouble, and unfortunately some people do have a negative attitude about using coloured paper, and usually it's about expense and things like that, these are available to use, and they're quite discreet, and they look a bit like a ruler, and they can fit in your pocket as well, and they're available from Crossbow Education. So I shall put that link up on Twitter at the end of this. So that's just this is what this means. It helps it stops text jumping about, and helps tracking. I have purple glasses, and that helps with tracking. There you are, Teresa.
We've got quite a wide range of people on the discussion tonight, actually. So there's somebody who's logged on who have dyspraxia and dyscalculia, somebody else who's just about to go on first placement who has dyspraxia. So hopefully, I know you guys are hoping to cover a wide range of things. So hopefully, if we get more into it, then people might start to ask some more specific questions. But there's certainly a wide range of people out there and a wide range of experiences.
That's really great to hear that people are sharing that experience, and hopefully we'll be able to explore those as we go along, or share some things with you that might help. Andy, what about in your experience? I mean, somebody asked about their epilepsy earlier, and these guys that are going into their first placement. It's fairly frightening enough to go into your first placement anyway, let alone with
I apologise because the sound went off about 10 minutes ago, but I think I've caught most of it. From the experience of having mentored students in the past, and actually not knowing as a mentor that the student had any type of disability or neurodiversity, the difference it made when I had students where I did know was quite significant. And sometimes that might be down to either a learning plan not being transferred across to the placement setting, or it might be the fact that the student hasn't disclosed. And I know there are sometimes fears around disclosure for students. And in my previous job, we did have some students who would not want to disclose because they thought they'd be discriminated against. And our answer was, well, you wouldn't want to work in an area that was going to be discriminating in that way anyway. And with, I think, the support from the University's Disability Service, they can help students disclose in an appropriate way, and they can also help students get a learning plan in place that can then inform the placement of what type of support would help. It makes the first and subsequent placements a lot less fearful for students if they've had some help in actually putting together their support requirements to take along to placement.
And that often is expected as the role of the personal tutor. I've been
Oh, I can't hear you, Adele. You've gone off.
No, I missed that, Adele. Still
No,
can't
I
hear you.
can't hear you, Adele. Well, while Adele's trying to get her earphones back on, I'll just talk about
Can you hear me
disclosure.
now?
Oh,
Can you hear
yes,
me
there we
Yeah.
go.
I've pulled the plug on my headphones, so we're sliding off my head. Okay, so what I was saying is that personal tutor's role is often about helping their students or those who are designated to assist in preparing students for placement around going in and visiting and doing learning plans. I've often visited my students on placement to see how they're getting on or talk to them before they go, especially as Andy was saying about disclosure. I think it's quite difficult for students who start to become aware that they may have a problem. They've not, couple of Teresa shared with us a couple of students who know that they've had some difficulties or issues, but those students who start to discover that things aren't going as right, or people are saying you're not picking that up quickly, or why aren't you able to add up those calculations, and there's the sort of the realization that maybe things aren't right. And I've had a experience with two students within the last 2 or 3 years that started going for assessment, but unfortunately because of how it made them feel, left it until things were really bad and difficult for them, and the placement was saying that they weren't coping and they were worried that they weren't going to pass it, and it was quite an emotional journey. One of them unfortunately couldn't cope and left, but the other one got things sorted and moved forward. And thinking about moving forward, I want to kind of move us forward as well. We've been 15 minutes plus into this. And move on to the next slide, which is kind of what we're starting to talk about, is the key issues in practice. And so those of you that had some experience, I don't know, those of you who've been mentors or tutors or otherwise, I don't know whether you've been tweeting us to talk about some of the problems that you've come up against. So I've mentioned one there, and Teresa, I don't know if there's anything else that people are talking about.
Adele, is it possible at this point to ask Megan about her experiences?
Yes, Megan. We hope you haven't fallen asleep. She's there, I know.
Hi.
Would it be
Hello?
possible, hello, can you hear us, Megan?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. We were just talking about disclosure, and also, I mean, my experiences as a person who supports people all over the UK on placement and with dyslexia and dyspraxia. We do a lot of placement and pre-placement work. Is that, you know, one placement can be absolutely fine, and you go into a different placement, and because of the demands of that placement, or perhaps the mentor, or perhaps the environment, issues can arise then. I was just wondering if you could share any experiences like that you may have had.
I don't actually have any learning disabilities, so I'm okay with I'm okay on placement. But there are a couple of students in my year that are dyslexic, and they tend to write on green paper. They are a little bit slower in their writing and thought processes. So I can only imagine on placement how difficult they find it, because even I find it quite difficult keeping up with all the paperwork, and you're rushed all the time, especially I'm on a medical admissions unit at the minute, and it's so busy and you just don't have time to fill out all of your paperwork, and you're rushed to do it all the time. So at the end of the day, when you're rushing to do everything, someone that is struggling to get things done on paper are going to really struggle to get all of their paperwork done in time and efficiently, because it's so hard to keep up on top of everything, and there's paperwork for so many different things, and a lot of it is repeated all the time, so they're filling out the same care plan 3 or 4 times, and I struggle with it because there's just so much. So it must be really hard for someone that has dyslexia to be able to keep on top of that, especially if they're finding it difficult with the white paper, and no one in our trust has the coloured paper. So those rulers that you were showing, that they would be really handy in our trust for people with dyslexia.
I know some of our students with dyslexia do use those tools. Another thing, we'll ask Teresa in a minute what people are saying, but Ray wants to say something.
Just briefly, one or two people have been putting questions up on the question and answer board. The Adele and Kerry and Megan and others can't really see those very easily. So if it's possible, can you tweet them, or
Yes.
if not, just know that we will come back to your questions at the end. So sorry if we seem to be ignoring you. We're not. It's just that Adele and Kerry can't see those questions. That was all. Thank you.
That's okay, thanks. One of my students has specific tools to assist her, but she feels very embarrassed about pulling them out in practice, and even in the classroom as well. And I'm sure that that's an experience that people have had. So one of our questions we wanted to ask is, how prepared do you feel, those of you that have been supporting students, how prepared do you think sorry, I've got my tongue tied now. How prepared do you think you are to support people with learning difficulties, or how prepared have you been or not? We're quite interested in comments that you might have that.
And a sub-question of that is about how do practitioners feel in clinical environments, whether they've had some of these ideas might help prompt some responses. Now, I support students and practitioners through access to work, so qualified practitioners who have dyslexia and dyspraxia who may be having some difficulties, or maybe just finished their preceptorship and they're allowed support through access to work, so we will give them some strategies. And we look at strategies, and we look at techniques that achieve the same goal but might have to do it in a slightly different way. What I really want to get over from this webinar is about neurodiversity being, is not about problems and difficulties as such. There may be those issues, but thinking about how they can be addressed, and not only addressed that is the benefit of the person with dyslexia or dyspraxia, but the benefit of all staff. And one of the things that does this, for example, is assistive technology. So it could be text help software, and I know Janice McClelland is tweeting with us today from Text Help at Work. Some trusts do have Text Help, which is a piece of software that reads to you on their trust computers. Some people have it through access to work, so it will be just on their device. Now, there is an issue that is something I'm quite passionate about, and I'm actually going to be writing about for the Nursing Times shortly, is about the discrepancy that maybe one trust may have something like Text Help or Claro to read information, but another trust may not. Or somebody may have it on their device, but then they're not allowed to use their device on the ward or on placement, and that's a big issue that really needs to be addressed. I brought that up at the NHS Employers Disability Summit recently as well, and we discussed it there. So there is software out there, and we were talking about Dragon before, weren't we, Adele?
Yes.
And that's a piece of software where you can speak and it types for you. It's great for notes. But again, usually you need to have Wi-Fi, so it is dependent on the Wi-Fi in the trust, and also it can be done on devices. But again, you would need a trust policy or permission to use that device on the ward. So there is some areas that aren't terribly inclusive, because the software that is identified as essential for to give somebody the same reading speed, for example, that Megan was talking about, or the same writing speed that Megan was talking about, are not allowed. So that is actually an issue. But that's something you can also talk about with your placement educator, and some universities and some trusts are more inclusive than others.
Which makes it difficult.
Which makes it very difficult.
Have you got anything from Twitter to share with us?
Hang on a second, just sending a tweet out.
Yeah, I've seen it starting to feel that you might have picked up some.
So there are a few bits and pieces. People have not just mentioned only in placement, but also, and I've got to find the right person, David Cleveland mentioned about actually being able to access things like the library and how inclusive areas like that feel. Sorry, I'll come up. There we are. Yeah. There's been a lot of discussion, as there was with you guys, around whether you disclose or you don't disclose your neurodiversity, and a lot of people are saying yes, it's really good to disclose early. Shirley Clements has tweeted, disclose early to mentor, to allow strategies to be put in place to support and help. And I think that makes an awful lot of sense, but also other people have made the point that actually it's really difficult to disclose. Dave has mentioned, I think that there are a lot of prejudices, and this makes people reluctant to disclose their conditions, and that we need to get over this. And I think, again, that's a really key point. So again, some really interesting points coming through on Twitter.
And I think this is what this slide shows as well. I don't know if you can, I hope you can all see that, about being treated different or feeling different. It can be a positive or a negative experience. And however, by disclosing, and this is the message I would like to get out today as well, by disclosing, it actually gives you safety net for a certain extent, so you don't get into crisis, you don't make a mistake and then be taken up and judged on that, or having to go before the board and then saying, oh, I have dyslexia and dyspraxia and that's why it happened. If you disclose at that point, it can only be taken into account from that point. So by disclosing at the beginning, you are making people aware of the reasonable adjustments or alterations that you may need as a person with a neurodiverse profile. I have dyspraxia, I have sensory processing disorder, and I have ADD. However, I'm a super organised person on the whole, usually very punctual, usually very organised. And that's because I have strategies in place to be organised and to be punctual, because if I didn't have those strategies, like my calendar, like my software, like my stick-it notes, my life would be chaotic. So it's not saying that you can't do it, but there is showing that awareness, saying it may take me a little bit longer to work out which bed is which, it may take me a little bit longer to get the hang of where things are, but I will get there, and what you can do is do this to help me. Or I would like your support in doing that, and I would like you to emphasize the positives rather than the critique all the time. And that kind of leads us nicely onto this one here about this positive placement experience. It's about communication, and that is one of the key NMC guidelines as well, and the importance of communication, and that's what I think disclosure can do for people. It can communicate your needs.
I think this is quite important, and I think, you know, one of the things that we were talking about, Kerry and I were talking about when we were thinking about putting this together, is the emotional impact of for students who have these issues, to overcome them, but also for mentors to feel that they can manage how they feel about supporting somebody. And one of the first experiences I had with a Year 1 student and going into the placement, and the mentor was really visibly stressed out. I don't know, I've never come across anybody like this before. I haven't got a clue what to do. I don't think I can do this, and I don't think I can do this. And she was saying this in front of the student, which is, on one side, that it's good that she, you know, she's sharing that she's concerned. But I also was thinking, you're not actually helping terribly well here. But we all sat down together and sat down with a sister and worked through things. And now, 6 years later, if I ever bump into that mentor again, she said, you know, it was worth it in the end. I felt that was so rewarding because I, you know, with the effort we put in, and the enormous effort the student put in, that she actually achieved with us, and she feels it's made her a better mentor all round, and made her open her eyes to thinking about it isn't just people with difficulties. And we talked earlier, and Megan was talking about going into an area which is extremely busy, and how you have to adapt so quickly. So I think those sort of things are quite important. But we also recognise who
Oh, you've gone off Adele again, Adele. Is anybody else not hearing Adele?
I can't hear Adele.
Okay, well, I'll just take over and hopefully everybody can hear me while Adele is trying to work out her headphones. But this is what I would like to extend now and hopefully bring Megan in on this, is that it doesn't necessarily mean because you have dyslexia or dyspraxia that you are going to have difficulties in placement. It can be that you excel in placement and it's the essays that cause you the difficulty. That's definitely the response that I have from all the students we support from all the universities across the UK. So it can be that you don't have this but you still have difficulties because of your learning style or the way that your mentor relationship. So I was just wondering if I could bring Megan in and maybe share your experiences of different placements and different issues that you may have had.
The issues that I have is just really busy wards and just trying to keep on top of things. I really struggle sometimes, and also drug calculations. I really worry about my drug calculations, which makes me get my numbers mixed up quite a lot, and then I worry that I'm overdosing my patient. But yeah, I do struggle a lot with the paperwork, just because there's so much of it, and every ward is different. I'm lucky because I'm in one trust, so all the paperwork is generic, and it is mostly the same, but every patient has different care plans, and it does differ every ward that you go to, and it is a really busy hospital. So even on a night shift, you're constantly filling out paperwork, and it is hard, and you do get confused as well. I get confused with my patients, and sometimes it's really awful, but sometimes I don't, because I don't remember my patients' names. I have to go with it by bed 1, bed 2, bed 3, bed 4, and then I still sometimes get confused because I get my numbers mixed up because I'm just so busy and I'm trying to excel at so many different things. That yeah, it's hard sometimes.
Well, I really thank you for sharing that very personal experience, Megan. Let me reassure you that that is actually something that we hear all the time, but I think it's really great for the context of this neurodiversity webinar that you talk about this as a student who has learning needs. And who is finding it challenging. And it can be any student that we have to support, and this is about this praise effort idea again, and this idea of trying to do one thing at a time, having checklists and templates, communicating your needs, the chance to overlearn your skills helps if you're in the same trust and there's a similar paperwork that you have to fill out all the time. I was just wondering, Megan, if you could tell us, do you have, because this is an experience that I might share after what you tell us, about your reviews and interviews with mentors and when they happen, and do they happen on time?
Mostly not, mainly because everywhere's so busy. They do happen, but not generally when it's planned. Everything gets done on time, deadlines are always met, but it's not always when they say that it's going to be. Sometimes
and what effect does that have on you?
It stresses me out quite a lot because I think, oh gosh, I haven't met my criteria, I can't upload this to my portfolio, my mentor hasn't signed me off, and then I'm on opposite shifts to my mentor, and that stresses me out as well, because then I think, oh gosh, I'm not going to get signed off, and then I'm going to do stuff even longer. Being on placement is a stressful time, and I can imagine for someone with dyslexia and trying to process all of that writing and thought processes and all of those care plans and all of the repetitive paperwork as well, especially in our trust, everything's repeated so much. You know, I can imagine that they would struggle. I struggle.
Excellent, and again, thank you so much for sharing that, Megan, because you know that can feel exposing, but I'm sure that this environment and Twitter will treat this as a safe environment. And again, it's about this idea of mentors and placement educators and university lecturers and being aware that this isn't just necessarily a neurodiverse issue, it's an issue for all students and their learning needs.
Extremely supportive.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
That's all right. We lost everybody for a minute there. Teresa's been waving. Teresa,
there are some really interesting things coming through on Twitter, so I thought I'd just kind of pop up.
Right.
So Corinne has tweeted. There's a lot of support coming through for Megan. So Corinne's tweeted saying, "I'm totally the same with drug calculations, Megan. You know, people are really kind of supportive out there of, you know, no matter what difficulties any of us have to support them." But I just thought it was really kind of a tweet from at Ian KGI that really struck me, and that was why I popped up. He's tweeted, or she's tweeted, any others with essential tremor, I am struggling at the moment and feel like quitting. And to me, that's just really just not where you want a nurse or a student nurse to be. So I just wonder if you guys have any advice or anything that you can say to help.
Andy, anything? He's gone. Hello, Andy.
Hello? Hello? Yeah, it's just, yeah, listening to all that, and especially that last tweet as well. I'm not sure whether how many students are actually using the relevant university's disability support service, because when I was at Exeter in that role there, it was when, you know, for various reasons we might not see a student until second, third year, either because a diagnosis hadn't been made before then, or they weren't always aware of the service. And the difference it made to students, I was also a disabled students allowance assessor, and the difference it did make to students when they found out what was available in terms of people support, as well as the assistive software that Kerry's spoken about as well, makes a massive difference. I would basically say anyone who's concerned about their placements, their practice in relation to any type of disability, to contact the university. In this case it's Disability Assist at Plymouth, because they can then start providing the advice and putting people in touch with the relevant assessments that can then make recommendations on how you can actually still perform in practice, if that helps. It's a long-winded way of saying please use the relevant university's disability support service.
I would like to second that, but with a little bit of caution. And I don't mean to be negative, because that's not the sort of person I am, but one of the reasons that Diverse Learners was set up to support students, I'm one of those people that Andy's just been talking about that can support students with dyslexia and dyspraxia, both with their academic work and their placement work. One of the reasons Diverse Learners was set up was because there isn't necessarily the awareness out there, and also not all disability services are equal, and not all of them are as great as Plymouth and Salford and the other people that we've liaised with. It's very easy, Plymouth, because you're very proactive and you listen to your students and you flag services up, to assume that the rest of the universities are like that. And unfortunately some universities that students that I support have been at haven't necessarily had that expertise or have had the people around to support. So we support 7 days a week from 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock, because a lot of university support is only between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock and then finishes at April. So between April and September there isn't any support for students out there. So yes, absolutely do flag it up with your disabled students access centre and your placement educators, who may have equipment that they can loan or suggest for you. So I've supported deaf nurses, for example, who have the ability to have a different stethoscope, and it's a very simple fix, but unless your university is very knowledgeable about that, that can be quite difficult for students to know. So forums like this, and also RCN students and other tweet chats and Facebooks are also very useful in a way to get information about what's out there and how that can help. So I don't want to be negative, because there is a lot of help out there, but you do have to sometimes really fight your corner and really keep on nagging, and it might need repeated emails.
And I think there is also an organisation, when I was doing this last year, I don't know whether they're still doing this, Disability Alliance, and they also had a section for students with disabilities, I think the British Dyslexia Association as well were quite useful. I would hope that universities' disability services, I'm being a bit naive here. I would hope they're all of a really high level, but I only know Exeter. I don't work for Plymouth. I only know Exeter, and I used to go to a lot of conferences, and I would hope they're all at the same level. If they're not, and you're not getting the support from your separate universities, then just like I'd say, nag your personal tutor or whoever you're in touch with at the university as well.
And students are in charge of their own disability students allowance, so they can actually take their support to whoever they like, because that's why we have students from across the country who not for some reason or other haven't been able to access support at their university, so they come to us. And again, that's not necessarily generally known, but it's one of those issues. And we've talked about this quite extensively in the AHEAD conference last month in March about universal design for learning, which is about actually thinking about things very differently and actually putting reasonable adjustments in as standard, so they're useful for everybody, so it doesn't become an add-on reasonable adjustment, it just becomes a good way of practicing and an inclusive way of working. So and there's a couple of articles that I can post up on Twitter afterwards that we wrote for them, which might actually look at things from a different perspective for students and actually make them more aware of, and for practitioners, of what support is out there.
So before I ask Kerry to share some tips for strategies, Teresa, is there anything else that's important that's coming up? Well, it's all important, but anything worth sharing on Twitter?
There's a little bit of conversation going on around actually accessing the, and I've got to get the terminology right, is it disability support services that Andy was talking about? Somebody has mentioned it's STN 2018. I can't get to my disability service. It's too far away and I have no transport. She's in uni 9 till 4, Monday to Friday, which I guess is a real problem. There's a few kind of questions and people are kind of trying to support her a little bit, maybe seeing if she could access via Skype or you know, or something along those lines. But that's all that's going on at the moment. Oh, the other issue that was coming up was dragon and local accents. Seems to be problematic.
I can offer some support on that.
Can you help with that, Kerry?
Yeah, okay. Now, dragon, I mean, can you see that I've got the RCN Edge publications to explore up? Can you see that slide at the moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to, I will talk about Dragon, but I just want to get these up. So this is useful for managers and practitioners. It was written by Michelle Cowan, who's at Southampton University for the Royal College of Nursing. And it has some tips and hints in there, what possible things that can be put in place. And then this is also a useful one. This is actually from a student called Louise Fisher. I mentioned this last time as well because it's a great resource. She was a third-year student nurse at the time and wrote this as part of her project, as part of her dissertation. This is the link there, and it was advice for students with dyslexia during their clinical placement. So she got a bit fed up that, you know, there wasn't much out there, so she did it herself. There's a lot of tables in there and some ideas in there as well. So I'd really suggest that you look at that, because then that's a precedent that's set. You can go to your mentor and say, look, this student had it at this trust at Worcester University, so I think that would be fair for me to have it too. So it's a kind of a bit evidence-based, if you like. And then this one as well is supporting dyslexic students on practice placements. It has some ideas as well for mentors. Now, Dragon, I'm going to put this slide up. Can you see that one? Common concerns for reading and writing.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Triathlon. That's it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the ones that I have actually put on here is text-to-speech app here. So we have talked about it. So the common concerns are in the dark blue, which are these ones on the arrows, and the potential strategies are in the light blue boxes. So text-to-speech app, absolutely. I would demonstrate it. I would demonstrate it now, but we don't quite have the time to do it. Regional accents can be an issue. There are a couple of hints and tips that you can do. Now, there is Dragon for your computer, which you have to train, and I would advise you to go through the training process as soon as possible. It's just reading a passage for a certain amount of time. And every word that you get, it gets wrong, so if it perhaps puts being instead of been, you would highlight the word and you would say spell that, and you would correct it. And what happens is the more you correct the words it gets wrong, the more it learns the way that you work and the more informed the choices it makes. Now, as Dragon on a device, I have 100% accuracy, but what you need to realize is that if you're on Wi-Fi, Dragon is sending your voice, and I know this is kind of weird, over to a server. The server's making calculations on the different combinations of words that could be happening and then sending it back. Now, if you say full stop at the end of a sentence, so Teresa Chin has fantastic shoes which are nursing shoes but not shoes for nursing, full stop, by putting that full stop you're limiting the number of words it's having to calculate. So it can only be a certain amount of words and combinations. They're in the millions, which is kind of freaky that it can do this stuff. But if you continue to talk without a pause whatsoever and you add different words and you keep talking, blah, 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 there's so many combinations that those words can make, it will be less accurate. So simply putting a full stop, saying full stop at the end of your sentence will aid the accuracy of Dragon, and also enunciation. So just being clear and taking your time to plan your sentence and think about what your sentence is, full stop. What that does is that if it is quite a strong regional accent, again, it just gives those pauses in between each word. Not so you are doing that, that's too much, but just take a little bit of pause just so they can hear the words, so the words don't string into each other. So I hope that's helped. And if you are using Dragon, make sure you use your training, as Andy said earlier, from your DSA package. Make sure you have your AT training. We provide it via Skype as well, so there's lots of ways that you can get your AT training. Your IT department might be able to help you as well. So this is why I've kind of got this slide up, is that this amazing little device, which may be your tablet or maybe your phone, actually, if we thought about having a trust policy, all the issues, they're useful for all. So you have access to the BNF app, for example. So if they've gone to the trouble of making an app, it makes sense that you can access it from the ward. But I hear so many people can't access that BNF app from the ward, even when they're using tablets. Remembering abbreviations, you've got a camera to help you take photos of the store, of course with permission. There's a calculator for drug calculations. There's a mind mapping app, so if you want to plan and organise, and like Megan was saying earlier, when you feel quite rushed and you've got lots of things to do, or you could write the people's names on a plan that looks like the plan of the map. So if you've got beds down here, you can have 4 either side and put the names of the people on there. You've got a spell check. You've got vibrating alarms. So for me, one of my key things is, you know, let's think about this differently. Let's think about having an NHS policy about bringing your own device. Or there's a lot of tablets now used on wards, but they tend to be electronic data collection tools that are just a bit like glorified paper. You're still doing the same work, but you put it on a tablet. And I would really like to have those tablets, which are very expensive, utilised to their full by being able to put some of these apps on there and use them. And then actually it's a very cost-effective way of working, because you're not having to give each individual their own software package that they may not be able to access. It's actually all on those devices. And I know that sounds a little bit preachy, and I do apologise, but I do think that some of these issues would actually meet the Universal Design for Learning brief and actually be really cost effective for the NHS and more efficient for the users. Has anybody got anything to say on that before I go on to some other things?
Kerry, I just wanted to bring up very quickly something that's on Twitter. Forgive me for not putting my my video up, but just very quickly. Oh Lordy, I've got to find it now. Zoe Sherwood has just brought up that she struggles with combining placement, assignment and family life the more tired she becomes, the more that her dyslexia affects her. And I kind of, you know, this, from you going, yes, it sounds like this could be quite a common problem. So just kind of wanted to bring it up for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that is again, I think is vastly underestimated, and actually Megan touched on as well, who says she isn't neurodiverse or has a disability. You know, when she's rushed, when she's tired, you know, she forgets people's names more likely. You know, she gets more worried about getting her numbers mixed up on the on calculations. And I think it's something, again, really useful for mentors and university practitioners and dyslexia tutors and dyspraxia tutors like myself to really recognise is the energy it takes. You know, you could be doing, it's like doing a full-time job and you've got an essay to write. But if you're travelling to, you know, an hour or more to placement and you're doing a 12-hour shift, you're taking 14 hours out of the day just getting to work and back. Then you have to have shower and then you have to have food. There isn't actually any other time in which to do studying and see your kids. So it's something that we look at diverse learners a lot. We do academic support and we do assistive technology support, we do placement support, but what we actually look at an awful lot, as Teresa will know, is self-esteem, self-confidence, work-life balance, and the importance of seeing study in a different way, as taking breaks, as self-care, and I know that's posted a lot actually by we nurses. So Zoe, that's absolutely common, and it's, you know, don't feel bad about it. It's good that you're self-aware, that you recognise that, and there are a number of strategies that maybe you could work on with your dyslexia tutor if you can get access to them, or your placement practitioners, and communicate that to your mentor, flag that up. Some placements, and again I might be a bit controversial, but some placements do make time for their students to actually go to the library, like Dave Cleland I think on Twitter was saying, go to the library, have that time for research. So yeah, you are more likely to be very tired and your dyslexia play up, for want of a better word. I know that's not the greatest word in that case. So again, it's this idea about praising effort.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. Sorry to stop you. We're running short of time, and Megan's got something to say. Then we're going to do a round up and round off. Thanks, Megan.
I just wanted to follow on from what Kerry said. I know, like, I understand the pressures that student nurses are under, what with placement and essays and exams, especially exams at this time of year. You have your OSCEs, your practicals, your theories, your biology exams, you have to do your EU directives, and I know this year I've got 5 EU directives to do, and they're all about 2,500 words each, and then you've got your portfolio that you have to upload, and I know how stressful it is, as well as working as well, especially if you don't get any student finance or bursary, you have to work. I work every single weekend, so I know the pressures that student nurses are under, but I know that there's a lot of support within the university as well. The lecturers are incredibly supportive, and my personal tutor especially, she's been an absolute godsend, and honestly I don't think that I would still be doing my training if it wasn't for her. And also there's counsellors at our university as well, that if you are struggling with workload and you are just struggling generally, especially on placement when the hours are, I mean, our hours in our trust is 12.5 hours, and like Kerry was saying, it's an hour to work, an hour home from work. You know, a lot of the times you don't even get time to eat, then you get home, you stuff your face, you shower, and then you feel sick, so you can't go to sleep, so you get extra tired. And it's just a vicious circle, but there is support at the universities, and there's counsellors at our universities that are extremely supportive. So if you are struggling with that, I would suggest seeing a university counsellor or talking to your personal tutor, and just getting some extra support, because it is available.
Thanks, Megan. I was going to mention counsellors as well, and thank you for you saying that, because it sounds much better coming from you than from that. Counsellor. No, we don't say it like that, but we, you know, some students like to, some students don't, some do and don't. We have got only a very few minutes left. Is there anything anybody else wants to say? Is there anything on Twitter? Otherwise, we're going to ask you what you how you found it tonight. And we certainly you know, have found it good talking to you guys. Is there anything anybody else wants to add from the panel?
So I think just my very last Twitter update, Nick G has just tweeted, talk. People don't know what they don't know. So let's have the discussion. Let's move forward as one. So, which I think is a really good place to end on Twitter. Really, I think that's very important. Keep talking about it. Keep telling people about it, and keep educating people.
Can I just reiterate as well about the seeking support is not about giving up independence at all. It's about gaining equal access to your studies. And out of all the students that we used to see at Exeter, and the ones I speak to now, it's actually having that mindset that it's nothing to do with giving up independence, and it is all about having it is based about having equal access to practice placements as well as the actual coursework as well. So again, like the other person said on Twitter, talk. Yeah, I totally agree, and not to kind of hide. I don't suppose it's not. It's basically if you can get access to the support, go for it. And if you don't know where to get it from, just make sure you're speaking to as many staff as you can do until you get the right answers. Don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. That's very important. We have only got 1 or 2 minutes left. Thank you, Ray. I was just going to ask you, could you flash that up? Just as a last request, thank you all very much for staying with us for the duration. We hope it's been useful. We'd like to know from you, and I'd like to extend my thanks to all those who have participated in their own time. Megan obviously has taken a bit of time out of their studies, Kerry, Andy, and also the wonderful Teresa, and all of you who've participated on Twitter. Too many to mention, but many thanks. So please click the button. How is it going? How are we doing, Ray? Because we're going to say goodnight in just 2 minutes.
Got 83%, so I'll 86. Come on, 1 or 2 more votes. Maybe.
Oh, 1 or 2 more people before go. Okay, thank you very much for the feedback. Some of you might have found that useful. Even if you found it a little useful, we're hoping it might give you some things to think about and take away. This recording will be available later on the We Community site, and we can certainly email everybody the presentation, because there are 1 or 2 things that we didn't touch on, although Kerry has covered quite a lot of ground in such a short space of time. We've literally got 1 minute left, and thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been good for us, and hopefully we'll see you all again on another webinar, a web tweet. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Ray. And goodbye.